The wedding dress hung in my childhood bedroom like a ghost of broken dreams, its ivory silk catching the morning light streaming through the window I'd stared out of for 26 years. In 3 hours, I was supposed to walk down the aisle of St. Margaret's Cathedral to marry David Chen, the man I'd loved since college. Instead, I was sitting on my childhood bed, mascara running down my cheeks, staring at a text message that had shattered my world. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Sorry Mia. David Chen. The better twin always wins. Victoria, my hands trembled as I read it for the 100th time, the words blurring through fresh tears. Victoria. My identical twin. Sister. The person who knew me better than anyone in the world had just stolen my fiancé 3 hours before our wedding. The irony wasn't lost on me that this was happening in the same room where we'd shared secrets as children, where we'd practiced our wedding day fantasies with bedsheet veils and bouquets of dandelions. Victoria had always been the bold one, the risk-taker, the twin who got what she wanted. But this was beyond anything I could have imagined. My phone buzzed again. David's number. Mia, I'm sorry. I never meant for this to happen. Victoria and we realized we're meant to be together. I can't go through with the wedding. Please forgive me. I stared at the message until the words lost all meaning. 4 years of dating. 2 years engaged. Thousands of dollars spent on the perfect wedding. 300 guests already seated in the cathedral. And they realized they were meant to be together on my wedding day? A soft knock interrupted my spiral into darkness. Mia, honey? My mother's voice was gentle, concerned. The car will be here in 20 minutes. I couldn't answer. How do you tell your mother that her daughter's wedding is off because her other daughter seduced the groom? How do you explain that the twin who was supposed to be your maid of honor had become your worst betrayal? Mia? The door creaked open. Mom stepped inside, radiant in her navy blue mother of the bride dress, her smile fading as she took in my devastated appearance. Oh, sweetheart, what's wrong? Wedding day nerves? I held up my phone, unable to speak. She read the messages, her face cycling through confusion, shock, and finally, burning anger. That little. She caught herself, sitting heavily on the bed beside me. I should have known. The way she's been acting lately, asking so many questions about David, about your relationship. I thought she was just being protective. She's been planning this, I whispered, my voice hoarse from crying. The late-night coffee dates with David when I was working overtime. The sudden interest in our relationship problems. The way she insisted on helping plan every detail of the wedding. She's been studying my life like a script. Mom wrapped her arms around me, but even her warmth couldn't penetrate the ice that had formed around my heart. We'll cancel everything. I'll handle the guests, the vendors, no. The word came out sharper than I intended. I pulled back, wiping my eyes with the back of my hand. No, we're not canceling anything. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, like this video, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Honey, you can't possibly want to go through with, I'm not going through with the wedding. I clarified, standing and walking to my dresser mirror. My reflection looked back at me, red-rimmed eyes, smudged makeup, tangled hair. But underneath the devastation, something else was stirring. Something dark and determined. But Victoria is. Mom's brow furrowed. I don't understand. I turned back to her, a plan already forming in my mind. Victoria wants my life so badly? She wants my fiancé, my wedding, my moment? Fine. Let her have it. But she's going to get exactly what she deserves. Mia, what are you thinking? I moved to my laptop, my fingers flying over the keyboard. Victoria's been so busy seducing my fiancé that she's forgotten one crucial detail. She asked me to handle the final wedding arrangements yesterday, including the priest's pre-ceremony briefing. Understanding dawned in my mother's eyes. The background check forms for the marriage license, which I still have access to modify, I finished, pulling up the diocesan wedding portal. And Victoria has been very busy lately. Busy enough to accumulate some interesting legal troubles she thinks nobody knows about. It was true. Last month, I discovered by accident that Victoria had been arrested for credit card fraud in Nevada 6 months ago. She'd managed to get the charges reduced to a misdemeanor with community service, but she'd never told the family. She'd also racked up 3 DUIs in the past 2 years under a fake name, thinking she was clever enough to avoid consequences. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. This was it. The moment that would define who I really was. The good twin who always played by the rules, or the sister who finally fought back. Mia, Mom said carefully, are you sure about this? I thought about David's hands on mine when he proposed, swearing he'd love me forever. I thought about Victoria's smug smile when she'd announced she was my maid of honor, knowing she was already planning to betray me. I thought about all the times she'd taken things from me, boyfriends in high school, job opportunities, even friends, and I'd just let it happen because family comes first. Not anymore. She wants to be me. I smiled, but it felt cold and unfamiliar on my face. Then she gets to face my consequences too. I began typing, adding Victoria's real legal troubles to the marriage license verification forms. The diocesan policy was clear: any criminal background had to be disclosed and discussed during the ceremony as part of their commitment to honesty in marriage. Father Miguel was notoriously thorough about following church protocol. My phone buzzed again. Victoria. Just so you know, I'm wearing your dress. It fits perfectly. Twins, right? David says I look beautiful in it. The cruelty was breathtaking. Even for Victoria, this was vicious. She was actually going to wear my wedding dress to marry my fiancé. I hit submit on the updated forms and stood up, surprising myself with how steady I felt. Mom, I need you to do something for me. Anything, sweetheart. I need you to go to the cathedral. Sit in your seat. Act like everything is normal. And when Father Miguel makes his little announcement. I paused, imagining the look on Victoria's face when her criminal record was read aloud to 300 wedding guests. I want you to have the best seat in the house. Mom's eyes widened. You're not coming? Oh, I'll be there, I said, opening my closet and pulling out a simple black dress. But not as the bride. I'll be in the back, watching my sister get exactly what she deserves. As I changed clothes, my phone exploded with messages from the bridal party, asking where I was, if I was okay, if they should come over. I ignored them all. Let them figure it out when they arrived at the cathedral and found Victoria in my dress, preparing to marry my fiancé. The final message I sent was to my best friend Sarah, who was supposed to be one of my bridesmaids. Change of plans. Victoria is the bride now. Make sure you get everything on video. Trust me, you won't want to miss this. 45 minutes later, I sat in the back pew of St. Margaret's Cathedral, wearing sunglasses and a black dress that made me look like I was attending a funeral. Which, in a way, I was. The funeral of my old self, the twin who always played nice, who always put family first, who always let Victoria win. The cathedral was buzzing with confused whispers. Guests kept turning around, looking for me, whispering questions to each other. The bridal party looked bewildered as they processed down the aisle without the actual bride. Then came Victoria, resplendent in my ivory silk dress, her arm linked with our father's. She was glowing, triumphant, probably thinking she'd pulled off the perfect crime. Behind her veil, I could see her satisfied smile. David stood at the altar looking uncomfortable but resigned. He'd made his choice. Now he'd live with the consequences. Father Miguel began the ceremony with his usual warmth and dignity. I'd known him since childhood. He'd baptized both Victoria and me, confirmed us, listened to our confessions. He was a good man who believed in the sanctity of marriage and the importance of honesty between spouses. Dearly beloved, he began, his voice carrying easily through the cathedral, we are gathered here today to witness the union of David Chen and Victoria Reed in holy matrimony. A ripple went through the congregation. Victoria Reed, not Mia Reed. People were starting to put the pieces together. Before we proceed, Father Miguel continued, consulting his notes, church doctrine requires that I address certain disclosures that have been brought to my attention regarding the bride's background. Victoria's head snapped up. Even from the back of the cathedral, I could see her confusion. This wasn't part of our rehearsal. According to the documentation provided, Father Miguel said, his voice growing more concerned as he read. The bride has several undisclosed legal matters that must be acknowledged before God and this congregation. The cathedral fell silent. David turned to look at Victoria, his face a mask of confusion and growing alarm. Father Miguel cleared his throat. Victoria read, "You stand before us today despite having been convicted of credit card fraud in Clark County, Nevada, 6 months ago. You also have 3 pending DUI charges under the alias Tori Valdez in California." The gasp that went through the congregation was audible. Victoria's bouquet, my bouquet, tumbled from her hands. Furthermore, Father Miguel continued, clearly disturbed by what he was reading, "There are outstanding warrants for your arrest in 2 states for violation of probation terms." That last part wasn't true, but Victoria's panicked expression told me she wasn't sure. And in her guilty conscience, she probably believed it could be. "I'm sorry," Father Miguel said, closing his folder and looking directly at Victoria, "but I cannot in good conscience perform this ceremony. The foundation of Christian marriage is honesty and trust, and these undisclosed deceptions make that impossible." The cathedral erupted. 300 guests began talking at once. Victoria stood frozen at the altar, my veil framing her horrified face. David stepped back from her like she was contagious. "This is a mistake," Victoria shouted, her voice breaking. "Someone's lying. Someone set me up." But her protests only made her look more guilty. The specific details, the official tone of Father Miguel's announcement, the formal church setting, it all gave weight to the accusations. I stood up from my pew and began walking toward the altar, pulling off my sunglasses. The crowd parted like the Red Sea, every eye fixed on my approach. "Hello, Victoria," I said when I reached the altar, my voice carrying clearly through the cathedral's perfect acoustics. "Beautiful dress. It looks familiar." Victoria stared at me, her face cycling through shock, rage, and desperate calculation. "Mia, I can explain." "Explain what?" I asked sweetly. "How you seduced my fiancé. How you stole my wedding dress. How you thought you could just take my entire life and I'd quietly disappear." The congregation hung on every word. This was better than any soap opera. David found his voice. "Mia, I'm sorry. I never meant for it to happen this way." "Oh, but you did," I interrupted, turning to face him. "You both did. You planned this. You orchestrated this. You thought. You were so clever, so careful. But you forgot one thing." "What?" Victoria whispered. I smiled, feeling powerful and dangerous and completely free. "You forgot that I know you better than anyone else in the world. I know every secret, every lie, every dirty little trick you've ever pulled. And now everyone else knows too." Victoria lunged for me, but our father caught her arm. "You vindictive little, careful," I warned, stepping back. "You're in a church. And you're already in enough trouble." I turned to address the congregation, my voice carrying to every corner of the cathedral. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the confusion. There will be no wedding today. But there will be refreshments at the reception hall, courtesy of the Reed family. Please, enjoy the party. Consider it a celebration of the truth finally coming to light." As I walked back down the aisle, the congregation parted once again. Some guests were laughing, others looked scandalized, but most seemed thoroughly entertained by the drama behind me. I could hear Victoria screaming my name, "David," trying to calm her down, and Father Miguel calling for order. But I didn't look back. I had a reception to attend. After all, I'd paid for it, and this was just the beginning. The Grandview Country Club had never hosted a wedding reception quite like this one. I stood at the entrance to the ballroom, watching 300 confused guests filter in, their voices creating a buzz of speculation that filled the ornate space. The centerpieces I'd agonized over for months looked perfect under the crystal chandeliers. The band was setting up on the stage where David and I were supposed to have our first dance. Everything was exactly as I'd planned it, except for the bride and groom. "Mia?" Sarah appeared at my elbow, her bridesmaid dress a splash of dusty rose against the neutral decor. Her eyes were wide with disbelief. "What the hell just happened back there?" I accepted a glass of champagne from a passing waiter, the champagne I'd carefully selected for toasts that would never happen. Victoria got exactly what she wanted. My wedding day. "But the priest, the criminal record thing, was all true," I said, taking a sip of the expensive Dom Perignon. It tasted like victory and grief in equal measure. "I just made sure the right people finally knew about it." Sarah stared at me like she'd never seen me before. Maybe she hadn't. The old Mia would never have pulled something this ruthless, this calculating. But the old Mia had also never been betrayed by the two people she trusted most in the world. My phone buzzed incessantly in my clutch, calls from Victoria, David, my parents, the wedding party. I ignored them all. They could figure out their own mess. I had a party to host. Ladies and gentlemen, I called out, moving to the center of the ballroom. The room gradually quieted as heads turned my way. Thank you all for coming today. As you witnessed at the cathedral, there's been a change of plans. Nervous laughter rippled through the crowd. Great Aunt Eleanor looked scandalized, while my college friends seemed torn between concern and fascination. The good news is, I continued, raising my champagne glass, we still have an open bar, a 5-course dinner, and the best jazz quartet in the city. So please, eat, drink, and enjoy yourselves. Consider this a celebration of truth over deception. More laughter, this time more genuine. People began to relax, moving toward the bar and appetizer stations. Nothing brings out people's social instincts quite like free premium alcohol and the promise of gossip. Mia. My father's voice cut through the background chatter. I turned to see him approaching, still in his tuxedo from the cathedral, his face a mixture of pride and concern. Behind him, my mother looked shaken but determined. Dad. I kissed his cheek, breathing in his familiar cologne. How did Victoria take the rest of the ceremony? He rubbed his forehead, a gesture I recognized from childhood whenever one of his daughters had caused trouble. She locked herself in the bridal suite at the cathedral. David's trying to talk to her, but she's not taking it well. I imagine not, I said dryly. Having your crimes announced to 300 people tends to ruin one's day. Mia, Mom stepped closer, lowering her voice. Those charges you mentioned, are they real? I nodded, pulling out my phone and showing them the screenshots I discovered weeks ago during my wedding planning. I found out by accident when I was updating our insurance beneficiaries. Did a background check to make sure everything was current. Imagine my surprise. Dad's jaw tightened as he read. Credit card fraud? DUIs? How did we not know about this? Because Victoria's always been good at compartmentalizing her life, I said. Remember when we were kids? She'd get in trouble at school and somehow convince the teachers not to call home. She's had years of practice hiding things. The ballroom doors burst open, and Victoria stormed in, still wearing my wedding dress but looking like she'd been through a tornado. Her carefully styled hair had come loose, her makeup was smeared, and there was a wild look in her eyes that I'd only seen once before, the night she got arrested for drunk driving in college and called me to bail her out. David followed close. Behind her, his tuxedo disheveled, his face pale. The entire reception fell silent as they made their dramatic entrance. You bitch. Victoria screamed, pointing at me across the room. You vindictive, jealous bitch. How could you do this to me? I set down my champagne glass and faced her calmly. Do what, Victoria? Tell the truth? I thought honesty was important in relationships. You sabotaged my wedding. Your wedding? I laughed, the sound sharp enough to cut crystal. Victoria, that was my dress, my fiancé, my venue, my reception. You just tried to steal it all. She advanced on me, fury radiating from every pore. David Chen. He loves me, not you. I glanced at David, who was standing near the entrance looking like he wanted to disappear into the marble floor. Is that right, David? You chose her? He opened his mouth, then closed it, clearly realizing that any answer would only make things worse. Because, I continued conversationally, if you chose her, that means you knew about her criminal record when you made that choice. Which makes you either complicit or incredibly stupid. I didn't know, David said quietly, finding his voice. Victoria, you never told me about any arrests. Victoria whirled on him. It wasn't relevant. That was all a misunderstanding. 3. DUIs and credit card fraud are misunderstandings. I asked innocently. What's your definition of actual crime? The crowd was watching this exchange like a tennis match, heads turning back and forth between us. I could see phones being discreetly pulled out, undoubtedly recording every word for later dissection on social media. You want to know the truth? Victoria's voice was rising to a shriek. The truth is that David came to me. He told me he was having doubts about marrying you. He said you were boring, that you never took risks, that he felt trapped. The words hit like physical blows, but I kept my expression neutral. I'd suspected as much. David had been distant lately, working late more often, picking fights over trivial things. But hearing it confirmed in front of 300 people was its own special torture. And you, being the loving sister you are, decided to help him with those doubts, I said steadily. I gave him what you couldn't. Victoria shot back. Passion. Adventure. Someone who wasn't afraid to live. You gave him someone who commits fraud and drives drunk, I corrected. Someone who lies to her own family. Someone who seduces her sister's fiancé and thinks that makes her passionate instead of pathetic. Victoria lunged for me then, but Dad stepped between us, catching her arms. Victoria, stop. You're making this worse. Worse? She struggled against his grip. How could it be worse? She's destroyed my life. You destroyed your own life, I said quietly. I just made sure everyone else knew about it. That's when I noticed Detective Martinez near the entrance to the ballroom, his badge visible on his belt. My stomach dropped. Someone had called the police. Ma'am, he approached Victoria. His voice professional but kind. I'm Detective Martinez with the County Sheriff's Department. I need to speak with you about some outstanding warrants. The blood drained from Victoria's face. Warrants? I frowned. I'd made up the warrant part during my Cathedral revelation, embellishing for dramatic effect. But Detective Martinez looked very serious. Victoria Reed, also known as Tori Valdez, he continued, pulling out a small notebook. You missed your court date in California last month for the DUI charges. There's a bench warrant out for your arrest. Oh. The warrant was real. I'd accidentally told the truth while trying to lie for effect. This is impossible, Victoria whispered, but her voice lacked conviction. I'm afraid I need to take you in, Detective Martinez said apologetically. You can call a lawyer from the station. The reception guests were transfixed. This was beyond wedding drama, this was live-action law enforcement. Wait, David stepped forward, his face flushed. Officer, there has to be some mistake. Victoria's a good person, she just, sir, I'm going to need you to step back, Detective Martinez said firmly. This is official police business. As he read Victoria her rights, she turned to look at me one last time. Her expression had moved beyond anger into something approaching devastation. I hate you, she whispered. I know, I replied softly. But I loved you. And you destroyed that. So now we're even. The detective led Victoria away in handcuffs, still wearing my wedding dress. The sight was so surreal that several guests pulled out their phones to capture it. Tomorrow, the internet would be full of bride arrested at reception videos. David started to follow them, then stopped, turning back to me. Mia, I cut him off. Just don't. You made your choice when you decided to betray me with my own sister. Live with the consequences. He stood there for a moment longer, then walked out, leaving me alone in the center of my ruined wedding reception. The silence stretched for what felt like hours but was probably only seconds. Then Great Aunt Eleanor started clapping. Slowly. Others joined in, until the entire ballroom was applauding. Well, said my cousin Marcus, appearing at my side with a fresh champagne glass, that's definitely going down as the most memorable wedding reception in family history. I accepted the drink gratefully. Even though there was no wedding? Especially because there was no wedding, he grinned. You just gave 300 people the story they'll be telling for the rest of their lives. As the evening progressed, something unexpected happened. Instead of the awkward, pitying atmosphere I'd expected, the reception became genuinely fun. Without the pressure of a wedding celebration, people relaxed. Old friends reconnected, distant relatives shared family stories, and the jazz quartet played requests ranging from classic standards to surprisingly jazzy versions of pop songs. Sarah found me on the terrace later, taking a break from the festivities inside. How are you holding up? She asked, settling beside me on the stone balustrade. I considered the question seriously. I should be devastated. My fiancé cheated on me with my twin sister, my wedding was called off in the most public way possible, and my sister was arrested at my reception. But honestly? I feel free. Free? I've spent my whole life trying to be the good twin, the responsible one, the one who never made waves. I let Victoria walk all over me because I thought that's what family meant. But watching her get dragged away in handcuffs while wearing my dress, I paused, searching for the right words. It felt like justice. Sarah was quiet for a moment. What happens now? Before I could answer, my phone rang. An unknown number. Hello? Mia? It's Detective Martinez. I wanted to let you know that your sister has been processed and is being held pending extradition to California. She's asked to speak with you. I'm not interested in speaking with her right now. I understand. But there's something else. During booking, we discovered she had several fake IDs with different names. This goes beyond the DUI charges. We're looking at potential identity theft, which could be federal. I closed my eyes. Victoria had always pushed boundaries, but this was beyond anything I'd imagined. There's more, Detective Martinez continued. She claims you fabricated evidence to frame her. Says you doctored documents to get revenge. I wanted to give you a heads up that internal affairs might want to speak with you. My blood ran cold. I didn't fabricate anything. I just made sure the church had accurate information for their records. I believe you. The charges we're holding her on are legitimate and well documented. But she's going to try to drag you down. With her. Be prepared. After I hung up, Sarah looked at me with concern. What was that about? I told her about Victoria's accusations, about the potential investigation into my role in exposing her crimes. But you didn't do anything illegal, Sarah said. You just told the truth. In a very public, very humiliating way, I pointed out. Victoria's not going to go down quietly. She's going to try to make me look like the villain in all this. So, what are you going to do? I stood up, smoothing my black dress, and looked back through the terrace doors at my reception in full swing. My parents were dancing to a slow jazz number. My college friends were taking selfies at the photo booth I'd rented. My boss from the marketing firm was deep in conversation with David's cousin about business opportunities. Life was going on. With or without David, with or without Victoria, with or without the perfect wedding I'd planned for 2 years. Life was continuing, and I was still part of it. I'm going to hire the best lawyer I can afford, I said finally. I'm going to cooperate fully with any investigation. And I'm going to make sure everyone knows exactly who Victoria really is. And David? I thought about my ex-fiancé, probably sitting in some bar trying to process how his perfect plan had exploded so spectacularly. David made his choice. He chose someone who commits fraud and lies to her own family. He can live with the consequences of that choice. You're not going to try to get him back. I laughed, surprising myself with how genuine it sounded. Sarah, David knew me for 4 years and still thought so little of me that he believed I'd just quietly disappear when he chose my sister. He didn't know me at all. And honestly? I'm not sure I knew him either. We stood in comfortable silence for a moment, listening to the music drifting from inside. Come on, I said finally, linking my arm through hers. I paid for an open bar. And a 5-course dinner. We might as well enjoy it. As we walked back inside, I caught sight of myself in the terrace door's reflection. The woman looking back at me wasn't the same person who'd sat crying in her childhood bedroom that morning. This woman stood straighter, smiled sharper, and had fire in her eyes. Victoria had wanted to destroy my life. Instead, she'd freed me from a life that was never really mine to begin with. A life built on other people's expectations, other people's definitions of who I should be. Tomorrow would bring lawyers and investigations and probably more drama than I could handle. But tonight, I was going to dance at my own reception, surrounded by people who genuinely cared about me, and if that wasn't victory, it was at least survival, which, given how this day had started, felt like more than enough. The law offices of Harrison, Klein and Associates occupied the top 3 floors of a gleaming downtown high-rise, all glass and chrome and expensive leather furniture that whispered success. I sat across from Margaret Harrison herself, watching her sharp gray eyes scan through the thick folder of documents I'd brought. Your sister certainly has been busy, Margaret said dryly, setting down the last police report. It had been 3 days since the Cathedral incident, and each day had brought new revelations about Victoria's secret life. Identity theft, credit card fraud, multiple DUI charges under various aliases, and now she's claiming you orchestrated a conspiracy to frame her. I shifted in the plush chair, still feeling surreal about needing a criminal defense attorney. Monday morning I'd been planning my honeymoon. Wednesday afternoon I was potentially facing charges for exposing my sister's crimes. The timeline doesn't Support her accusations, Margaret continued, making notes on her legal pad. These charges span 3 years, long before any wedding planning began. But Victoria's lawyer is claiming you had access to law enforcement databases through your job at the marketing firm. I design advertising campaigns for restaurants and retail stores, I said flatly. The most sensitive database I access contains customer demographics and purchasing patterns. I know that. You know that. But desperate people make desperate arguments. Margaret leaned back in her chair. Tell me about your relationship with Detective Martinez. I don't have one. I'd never met him before he showed up at the reception. He initiated contact with you after the arrest? I nodded, remembering the phone call that had left me shaken. He warned me that Victoria was making accusations. Said internal affairs might want to talk to me. Margaret made another note. That was professional courtesy, nothing more. But it gives Victoria's lawyer ammunition to claim you have connections in law enforcement. My phone buzzed with yet another call from David. I'd stopped answering after the first dozen attempts, but he kept trying. Each voicemail was more desperate than the last, ranging from apologies to blame to threats to strange declarations of love for both Victoria and me. Your ex-fiancé is also becoming a problem, Margaret observed, clearly noticing the call. His statement to police claims you've been acting erratically for months and that you engineered this situation out of jealousy. The betrayal cut deeper than I'd expected. It was one thing for David to choose Victoria over me. It was another entirely for him to actively try to frame me as unstable. What kind of man defends the woman who lied to him about multiple felonies? I asked. The kind who's desperate to avoid admitting he made a terrible mistake, Margaret replied. David's story only works if you're the villain. If Victoria is actually a criminal who manipulated him, then he looks like an idiot who threw away a good relationship for a con artist. She had a point. David's entire narrative depended on painting me as the unhinged ex-girlfriend and Victoria as the innocent victim of my jealous scheme. There's something else, Margaret said, consulting another folder. Our private investigator has been digging into Victoria's background. What we found goes far beyond the charges she's currently facing. She slid a manila folder across the mahogany desk. Inside were bank statements, credit reports, and what looked like surveillance photos. Victoria has been living well above her means for years, Margaret explained. Her official income as a freelance photographer wouldn't support the lifestyle she's been maintaining. Expensive clothes, luxury car payments, a condo in the arts district that rents for $3,000 a month. I studied the financial documents, noting charges at high-end boutiques, exclusive restaurants, and weekend trips to places like Napa and Aspen. How was she paying for all this? That's where it gets interesting. We found evidence of at least 6 different credit cards taken out in various names, all using slight variations of personal information. Victoria Reed, Tori Reed, V. Reed Martinez, Victoria Reeves. Each time she'd max out the cards and then disappear before the companies could track her down. My stomach dropped. She used my information too? Margaret's expression grew grim. Your credit score has taken several hits over the past 2 years. 3 cards were opened in your name and defaulted on. I'm guessing you don't check your credit report regularly? I shook my head, feeling naive. I trusted her. When we'd go shopping together and she'd suggest I apply for store cards to get discounts, I thought she was being helpful. She probably memorized your social security number, mother's maiden name, all the standard identity verification information. Growing up together gave her access to everything she needed. The scope of Victoria's deception was staggering. This wasn't just about stealing my fiancé. She'd been systematically robbing my financial identity for years. There's more, Margaret continued. The private investigator found evidence that Victoria has been running this same con in other cities. Phoenix, Denver, Portland. Each time, she'd establish herself in the local social scene, make friends with women who had good credit and stable lives, then slowly bleed them dry before moving on. I stared at the surveillance photos showing Victoria at various social events. In different cities, always impeccably dressed, always charming, always hunting her next victim. Those women, did they report her? Some tried. But Victoria was careful. She'd never take enough to trigger major investigations, and she'd always have explanations. Borrowed money that was never repaid, authorized use of credit cards for emergencies. That sort of thing. By the time her victims realized the pattern, she was already gone. My phone rang again. This time it was Mom. "Honey, you need to come home," she said without preamble when I answered. "The police are here with a search warrant." Margaret grabbed her briefcase. "Don't say anything until I get there." The drive to my parents' house felt endless. Margaret called ahead to her associate, who was already en route to make sure I wasn't questioned without representation. By the time we arrived, there were 3 police cars in the driveway and a small crowd of neighbors pretending to work in their yards while obviously watching the drama unfold. Detective Martinez met us at the front door, looking apologetic but professional. "Ms. Reed, we have a warrant to search your childhood bedroom and any computers you may have used recently. Your sister's attorney has presented evidence suggesting you've been planning this revenge scheme for months." "What kind of evidence?" Margaret demanded, reviewing the warrant. "Screenshots of internet searches about her criminal background, dating back 6 months. Saved files about identity theft laws and church wedding protocols. A detailed timeline of their relationship with annotations about when to expose her." My heart sank. I had researched Victoria's background when I first discovered her arrest record, but only because I was worried about her. And yes, I'd looked up church policies about criminal disclosure after I decided to expose her at the wedding. But the way Detective Martinez described it made me sound like a calculating stalker. "Those searches were legitimate research," I said. "I found out about her arrest by accident and wanted to understand what she was facing." "The timeline document?" I thought back to the file I'd created to organize my thoughts about Victoria's recent behavior. I was trying to figure out when she started pursuing David. I needed to understand if this was spontaneous or planned. Margaret squeezed my arm, a warning to stop talking. We watched as officers systematically searched my childhood bedroom, photographing everything, bagging my old journals and laptop. They found the notebook where I'd written down Victoria's arrest details and the folder where I'd kept screenshots of her social media posts with David. "This is all perfectly legal research," Margaret told Detective Martinez. "My client discovered her sister was committing crimes and made the reasonable decision to protect herself and inform relevant parties. Her sister's lawyer sees it differently. Claims Ms. Reed has been obsessed with destroying Victoria's relationships for years. They've provided statements from mutual friends about past incidents." That caught my attention. "What past incidents?" Detective Martinez consulted his notes. "High school boyfriend named Marcus Chen. Apparently you told his parents he was dealing drugs when he was just smoking marijuana. College roommate named Jessica Williams. You allegedly reported her to the RA for alcohol violations that resulted in her losing her scholarship." My mouth fell open. "Those aren't lies. Marcus was dealing. He got arrested 6 months later with 2 pounds of marijuana in his car. And Jessica was drinking herself into academic probation. I was trying to help her. Victoria's narrative is that you have a pattern of using authority figures to punish people who displease you," Detective Martinez said. "First teachers and parents, then college administrators, now law enforcement." Margaret stepped forward. "Detective, with respect, this is clearly a desperate attempt to deflect attention from my client's sister's actual crimes. Victoria Reed is facing multiple felony charges in multiple states. She's looking for someone else to blame. I have to follow the evidence where it leads," Detective Martinez replied. "But I will say this, the timeline doesn't support the conspiracy theory. These crimes span years, and the documentation shows a pattern of behavior that existed long before any wedding planning." The search took 3 hours. They seized my laptop, my old journals, and several notebooks where I'd written down information about Victoria's finances and behavior. Watching strangers rifle through my childhood possessions felt violating in a way I hadn't expected. After they left, I sat in the kitchen with my parents and Margaret, feeling drained. "This is my fault," Dad said quietly. "I knew Victoria was struggling financially, but when she'd ask for loans or use our credit cards for emergencies, I thought I was helping her get back on her feet." Mom reached across the table to squeeze his hand. "We both enabled her. Every time we covered for her mistakes, every time we made excuses for her behavior, we just made it easier for her to keep lying." "How long has this been going on?" I asked. "Years," Mom admitted. Remember when she got fired from the photography studio for personality conflicts? That was actually for stealing equipment. The gallery job she said she quit to go freelance? She was caught selling fake prints and claiming they were originals. The scope of the deception was overwhelming. Victoria hadn't just hidden her recent crimes, she'd been lying about her entire adult life. Why didn't you tell me? Because we kept hoping she'd change, Dad said. And because we knew you'd want to help, and we were afraid she'd drag you down with her. Which is exactly what was happening now. Margaret's phone buzzed with a text. Victoria's been denied bail, she announced. The judge considered her a flight risk given the multiple identities and outstanding warrants in other states. Good. I said, then felt guilty for the satisfaction in my voice. Don't feel bad about that, Margaret said, reading my expression. Your sister is facing serious federal charges now. The FBI has taken over the identity theft case because it crosses state lines. This isn't a family squabble anymore, it's organized crime. The word hung in the air like a bomb. Organized crime. My twin sister, the person I'd shared a womb with, was a career criminal. What happens to me? We wait, Margaret said. The physical evidence doesn't support Victoria's conspiracy theory, and her credibility is shot. But the investigation will take time, and your reputation is going to suffer in the meantime. She was right about that. My phone had been buzzing all day with calls from reporters who'd gotten wind of the wedding scandal. The local news had already run a segment about the bride's revenge, and someone had leaked security footage from the Cathedral to social media. By evening, #TwinsWitch was trending on Twitter. David called again while I was having dinner with my parents. This time, I answered. Mia, thank God. I've been trying to reach you for days. What do you want, David? I want to explain. I want to make this right. I know I made a mistake. You made a choice, I interrupted. You chose someone who you now know is a career criminal. Someone who stole my identity, defrauded multiple people, and lied about every aspect of her life. That's who you picked over me. I didn't know about any of that. You didn't care to know. You were so ready to believe I was boring and inadequate that you never questioned why Victoria suddenly became interested in your problems. You never wondered why she was always available when I was working late or visiting my grandmother. You just took what she offered and convinced yourself you deserved it. There was silence on the other end of the line. I love you, he said finally, his voice small. No, you don't, I replied. You love the idea of having a backup plan. You love knowing you have someone to fall back on when your first choice turns out to be a disaster. But you don't love me. If you loved me, you never would have betrayed me in the first place. I hung up and turned off my phone. Tomorrow would bring more lawyers, more questions, more revelations about the scope of Victoria's crimes. The FBI would want to interview me. The media would continue dissecting every detail of my humiliation, but tonight, for the first time in months, I felt clear about who I was and what I wanted. I wasn't the boring twin. I wasn't the backup plan. I wasn't the victim. I was the woman who'd stood up to a narcissistic sociopath and won, and that was enough. The FBI field office in downtown Portland was nothing like the sleek law offices I'd grown accustomed to. Gray carpeting, fluorescent lighting, and the persistent smell of burnt coffee created an atmosphere that screamed government bureaucracy. I sat in conference room B with Margaret, waiting for Special Agent Chen, no relation to David, thankfully, to begin what she described as a routine interview regarding ongoing federal investigations. Agent Chen entered with a thick file and a tablet, her expression professionally neutral. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe early 30s, with sharp eyes that seemed to catalog everything they saw. Ms. Reed, thank you for coming in voluntarily. She began, settling across from us. I want to start by saying you're not under investigation. We're trying to understand the scope of your sister's activities, and you may be our best source of information about her methods and timeline. I relaxed slightly. After a week of feeling like a suspect, being treated as a witness was a relief. How long have you been aware of Victoria's criminal activities? Agent Chen asked. I first discovered her arrest record about 6 weeks ago, purely by accident, I explained. I was updating our family insurance policies and ran a routine background check. That's when I found the Nevada charges. But you didn't report them at that time? I shook my head. I confronted her about it. She claimed it was all a misunderstanding, that the charges would be dropped. She begged me not to tell our parents because it would destroy them. Like an idiot, I believed her. Agent Chen made notes. On her tablet. What changed your mind? Finding out about her affair with my fiancé. That's when I realized she'd been lying about everything. Let's talk about the wedding day revelation. How did you access the diocesan portal to add information? To the marriage license verification? Margaret tensed beside me. This was the question we'd been dreading. Victoria had asked me to handle the final wedding arrangements as a favor, I said carefully. She said she was too nervous to deal with the paperwork. I had legitimate access to update the forms. And you added information about her criminal background? I added accurate information that should have been disclosed initially. The church requires honesty about criminal history as part of their marriage preparation process. Agent Chen nodded, seemingly satisfied with that explanation. Now, I need to ask you about something that may be difficult. We've been investigating Victoria's activities across multiple states, and we've discovered some information that doesn't align with what you've told us. My stomach dropped. What kind of information? Agent Chen opened her file and pulled out several photographs. These were taken over the past 3 years in various cities where Victoria operated. She spread the photos across the table. They showed Victoria at different social events, charity galas, and upscale restaurants. But something was wrong with the images. I don't understand, I said, studying the photos more closely. These look recent, but Victoria's hair is different in each one. And her clothes. Look closer at this one, Agent Chen said, pointing to a photo from what appeared to be a charity auction in Denver. This was taken 18 months ago. I stared at the image. The woman in the photo was definitely Victoria, but she was wearing a dress I recognized. A blue cocktail dress that I'd bought for David's company Christmas party last year. That's my dress, I said slowly. Are you sure? Positive. I bought it at Nordstrom specifically for that event. Victoria borrowed it a few weeks later for a work function. But this photo is from before I even bought the dress. Agent Chen exchanged a glance with her partner, who had been quietly taking notes in the corner. Ms. Reed, I need to ask you something, and I want you to think very carefully. Before you answer. In the past 3 years, have you ever traveled to Denver, Phoenix, or Portland for extended periods? Portland? We live in Portland. But Denver and Phoenix? No, never. I've never been to either city. Agent Chen pulled out another photograph. This one showed Victoria, or someone who looked exactly like Victoria, at what appeared to be a wedding reception. She was wearing a red dress that I'd lost months ago, claiming I must have left it at the dry cleaner. This was taken at a society wedding in Phoenix 2 years ago, Agent Chen said. The woman in this photo introduced herself to several people as Mia Reed. She told them she was an advertising executive from Portland, visiting Phoenix to scout locations for a client. The room started to spin. That's impossible. I was in Portland 2 years ago. I have employment records, credit card statements. We know, Agent Chen said gently. That's what makes this so concerning. She pulled out a tablet and showed me a driver's license. It had my photo, my name, my birth date, but the address was in Phoenix. Victoria didn't just steal your identity for credit cards, Agent Chen continued. She created a complete alternate version of you. Mia Reed of Phoenix, Arizona. Successful marketing executive, single, no family in the area. She's been living as you for years. I stared at the fake ID, trying to process what I was hearing. But how is that possible? We're twins. But we're not identical. People who know us can tell us apart. Actually, Agent Chen said, consulting her notes, you and Victoria are more identical than you realize. Your parents may not have been entirely honest about that. Margaret leaned forward. What do you mean? We've been investigating Victoria's background thoroughly, including medical records. According to your birth certificates and hospital records, you and Victoria are indeed identical twins. But sometime during childhood, Victoria had reconstructive surgery after a facial injury. Your parents may have downplayed the similarities to help you develop separate identities. My mind raced back to childhood. Victoria had always claimed we weren't identical, that we just looked similar. Our parents had supported this narrative, encouraging us to dress differently, style our hair differently, develop different personalities. But now I remembered things that hadn't made sense at the time: strangers constantly mistaking us for each other, teachers who couldn't tell us apart until we spoke, the way Victoria could perfectly mimic my handwriting and mannerisms when she wanted to. The facial reconstruction, I said slowly. She said she fell off her bike when we were 7. Hospital records show she had extensive plastic surgery to repair damage from what was described as a playground accident. But the surgeon's notes suggest the work was more cosmetic than medically necessary. It's possible your parents wanted to ensure you looked different enough to develop as individuals. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Victoria hadn't just stolen my identity, she'd been the original version of it. We were identical. Twins who had been artificially made to look different, and she'd spent years slowly reclaiming our shared appearance. There's more, Agent Chen continued. We've traced Victoria's movements over the past 5 years. She's been systematically visiting cities where she establishes herself as Mia Reed, builds relationships with wealthy men, defrauds them, and then disappears. Each time, she gets a little better at perfecting your identity. She showed me more photos: Victoria as me at restaurants, art galleries, business conferences. In each image, she looked more and more like the version of me that people knew. Subtle changes to her hair, her makeup, her posture that made her appearance converge with mine. David wasn't her first target, I realized with growing horror. She's been practicing on other men, learning how to be me convincingly enough to steal my life. We believe that's correct. David was the endgame, marrying someone who knew the real you well enough to validate her performance. If she could fool your fiancé into preferring her version of you, she'd have perfected the identity theft. Margaret was furiously taking notes. How many victims are we talking about? At least 12 men across 4 states, Agent Chen replied. Financial losses totaling nearly $2 million. But the psychological damage is harder to quantify. I thought about all those men who'd been seduced by someone pretending to be me, who'd had their hearts and bank accounts emptied by a woman wearing my face and name. The violation felt impossibly deep. There's something else we need to discuss, Agent Chen said, her tone growing more serious. We believe Victoria was planning to kill you. The words hit like ice water. What? In her apartment, we found detailed plans for what she called the final switch. Medical records showing she'd researched how to fake your death in a way that would look accidental. She'd already obtained life insurance policies in your name, with herself listed as the beneficiary using forged documents. Agent Chen pulled out printouts of web searches from Victoria's computer. Searches for untraceable poisons, staging accidents, how long before someone is declared dead, and most chillingly, can identical twins share the same identity permanently? Our psychological profile suggests she'd reached the conclusion that she couldn't perfect your identity while you were still alive to contradict her performance, Agent Chen explained. The wedding day revelation accelerated her timeline. She was planning to kill you and permanently assume your identity within the next few months. I couldn't speak. The sister I'd shared a womb with, grown up with, loved despite everything, had been planning to murder me. The affair with David was part of this plan, Agent Chen continued. She needed him to believe she was the better version of you. If he could be convinced to prefer her, it would validate her assumption of your identity. The wedding theft was supposed to be the proof that she'd successfully replaced you in every meaningful way. Margaret's pen had stopped moving. Even she seemed stunned by the scope of Victoria's pathology. Ms. Reed, Agent Chen said gently, I need you to understand that your sister is not someone who made bad choices or got in over her head. She's a sociopathic predator who's been planning to erase you from existence for years. The crimes we've documented are just the beginning. I stared at the evidence spread across the table: photos of Victoria living as me, insurance policies taken out on my life, search histories that mapped my planned murder. Everything I thought I knew about my sister, about our relationship, about our family, was a lie. What happens now? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Victoria will be charged with multiple federal crimes including identity theft, mail fraud, wire fraud, and conspiracy to commit murder. She's looking at life in prison without parole. And David? We believe he was manipulated, not complicit. Victoria is an expert at psychological manipulation. She studied you for years to learn exactly how to present herself as an improved version of you. David thought he was choosing between two different women, not between you and someone pretending to be you. That should have been comforting, but it wasn't. David had still chosen what he perceived as a better version of me. The fact that it was fake didn't change his underlying judgment. There's one more thing, Agent Chen said. We'd like you to consider participating in a controlled contact with Victoria. She's asking to see you, and we believe she might reveal information about other victims if she thinks she can manipulate you one last time. Margaret immediately objected. Absolutely not. My client has been through enough. But I was already nodding. I'll do it. Mia, that's not advisable, I need to see her, I interrupted. I need to look her in the eye and understand who she really is. All these years, I thought I knew her. I thought we had a bond. I need to know if any of it was real. Agent Chen studied my face. It could be dangerous psychologically. Sociopaths are master manipulators. She'll try to make you doubt everything you've learned. Let her try, I said, feeling a cold certainty settle in my chest. I'm done being the twin who gets fooled. 2 hours later, I was sitting in a different conference room, waiting to face the person who'd worn my face while planning my death. The person who'd shared my DNA but never my humanity, the person who'd almost stolen my entire existence. When Victoria walked in wearing an orange jumpsuit and handcuffs, I barely recognized her. Without the careful styling that had made her look like her version of me, she looked hollow, diminished. But her eyes were the same, calculating, predatory, searching for weakness. Hello, sister, she said, settling across from me with a smile that made my skin crawl. Hello, Victoria, I replied. Ready to tell me the truth for once in your life? The silence stretched between us like a chasm, filled only by the hum of fluorescent lights and the distant sounds of the federal building beyond these walls. Victoria sat perfectly still, her handcuffed hands folded on the metal table, studying me with the intensity of a scientist examining a specimen. Even in prison orange, even with her carefully constructed facade crumbling, she radiated a predatory confidence that made my skin crawl. You look tired, Mia, she said finally, her voice carrying that familiar note of false concern she'd perfected over the years. This whole ordeal must be so stressful for you. I almost laughed. Even now, even here, she was trying to position herself as the caring sister worried about my well-being. Cut the act, Victoria. We both know why we're here. Her smile shifted, becoming sharper, more genuine. Do we? Because I'm still not entirely sure what you think you know. Agent Chen had warned me about this, Victoria's ability to make her victims doubt their own reality, to plant seeds of uncertainty that would bloom into full-scale confusion. But I'd come prepared. I know you've been living as me in 4 different cities, I said calmly. I know you defrauded at least 12 men while pretending to be me. I know you took out life insurance policies in my name. And I know you were planning to kill me. Victoria's eyes flickered with something that might have been approval. Very good. The FBI has been thorough in their briefing. But do you know why? Because you're a sociopath who saw an opportunity to steal someone else's life rather than build your own. Is that what they told you? Victoria leaned forward slightly, the chains on her handcuffs rattling against the table. That I'm some kind of monster who randomly decided to destroy my innocent twin sister? Aren't you? Victoria was quiet for a long moment, her gaze fixed on something behind my shoulder. When she spoke again, her voice had lost its performative quality, becoming flat and matter-of-fact. Do you remember the accident? When we were 7. You fell off your bike. You had surgery to repair the damage. I didn't fall off my bike, Mia. You pushed me. The words hit like a physical blow. That's not true. Isn't it? Victoria's smile returned, cold and knowing. Think about it. Really think. We were fighting over something, a toy, maybe, or who got to go first on the swings. You got angry, really angry, and you shoved me. I fell and hit my face on the edge of the concrete playground border. Blood everywhere. Mom screaming. Dad trying to stop the bleeding with his shirt. Fragments of memory flickered through my mind, Victoria covered in blood, the ambulance, the way our parents had looked at me with something that might have been fear. But I'd buried those memories so deep I'd convinced myself they were nightmares. You're lying, I said, but my voice lacked conviction. Am I? Ask Mom and Dad about the therapy sessions. The ones where Dr. Peterson kept asking if you remembered. What happened if you felt guilty about hurting your sister? They were so worried about you, about what kind of child pushes her twin hard enough to require reconstructive surgery. The room felt like it was tilting. I gripped the edge of the table to steady myself. Even if that's true, we were children. Kids fight. Kids have accidents. It wasn't an accident, though, was it? Victoria's voice was gentle now, almost soothing. You meant to hurt me. You were angry that I was better at everything, better at making friends, better at getting attention, better at being the twin everyone remembered. So you decided to fix the problem. Stop it. The surgery changed everything, didn't it? Suddenly we looked different enough that people could tell us apart. Suddenly you could be the special one, the one with your own identity. Mom and Dad were so grateful that you seemed to feel better about yourself that they never questioned whether the accident was really an accident. I could feel tears burning behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. You're trying to manipulate me. Agent Chen warned me you'd do this. I'm telling you the truth. Something I've never done before. Victoria leaned back in her chair. For 26 years, I've let you live with the comfortable fiction that you were the good twin and I was the problem. But the reality is that you've always been capable of violence when you don't get what you want. The wedding day proved that. I exposed your crimes. That's not violence. You orchestrated a public humiliation designed to destroy my life. You researched how to cause maximum damage and then executed your plan with surgical precision. Does that sound like the behavior of someone who's never hurt anyone before? The words were working their way under my skin like poison. I could feel my certainty wavering, my carefully constructed narrative of victimhood beginning to crack. Even if I pushed you when we were 7, I said, forcing my voice to remain steady, that doesn't justify what you've done. Identity theft? Fraud, planning my murder. I never planned to murder you. Victoria's interruption was sharp, decisive. That was all speculation on the FBI's part. Yes, I researched life insurance policies. Yes, I looked into what would happen if you died. But that was contingency planning, not intent. Contingency planning for what? For the possibility that you'd try to hurt me again. Victoria's eyes were fixed on mine now, unblinking. You see, Mia, I've been watching you my whole life. Watching and waiting for the moment when your carefully controlled facade would slip, when the violent child you used to be would surface again. That's insane. Is it? What did you feel when you realized David was choosing me over you? What was your very first instinct? I didn't answer, but Victoria could read my face. You wanted to hurt us both. You wanted to make us pay. And you did, in the most devastating way possible. You didn't just expose my crimes, you orchestrated a public spectacle designed to humiliate me in front of everyone who mattered. That takes a special kind of cruelty, Mia. The kind you've always been capable of. The room was spinning now. Everything I thought I knew about myself, about our relationship, about who was the victim and who was the predator, was shifting like sand beneath my feet. You're wrong, I whispered. Am I? Then explain this. Victoria reached into her pocket, somehow she'd managed to keep something despite being searched, and slid a folded piece of paper across the table. With trembling hands, I unfolded it. It was a letter, written in my own handwriting, dated 3 months ago. Victoria continues to be a problem. She's interfering with my relationship with David, asking too many questions, making him doubt our compatibility. I need to find a way to remove her from the equation permanently. She's always been jealous of what I have, and now she's actively trying to destroy it. I won't let her win this time. I stared at the letter, my heart pounding. I had no memory of writing it, but the handwriting was unmistakably mine. Where did you get this? From your bedroom. Hidden in that old jewelry box where you used to keep your diary. Victoria's smile was triumphant now. Funny how you accused me of planning your destruction when you'd already been planning mine. I don't remember writing this. Of course you don't. You've become very good at forgetting the parts of yourself you don't like. Just like you forgot pushing me off that playground. Just like you forgot all the times you sabotaged my relationships in high school, my job opportunities in college, my attempts to build a life separate from yours. The memories were surfacing now, unwanted and undeniable. Times when I'd accidentally mentioned Victoria's mistakes to her boyfriend's friends. Times when I'd volunteered information about her past problems to potential employers. Times when I'd convinced myself I was protecting people from her, when really I was protecting my position as the good twin. You've been systematically undermining me for years, Victoria continued, her voice gaining strength. Every time I tried to move forward, to be better, to create something for myself, you found a way to tear it down. You couldn't stand the idea that I might actually succeed despite what you did to me. That's not. I was trying to help. Help? By telling Marcus Chen's parents he was dealing drugs when you knew it would get him expelled and ruin his scholarship chances? By reporting Jessica Williams for underage drinking when you knew her family's financial situation meant losing her scholarship would destroy her future? By calling my supervisor at the gallery to express concerns about my reliability? Each accusation hit like a physical blow because they were true. I had done all those things, but I'd convinced myself they were justified, that I was protecting people from Victoria's influence, that I was doing the right thing. You see, Mia, you've never been the victim in our relationship. You've been the aggressor. I just finally got smart enough to fight back. By stealing my identity? By seducing my fiancé? By giving you a taste of your own medicine? By showing you what it feels like to have someone systematically dismantle your life? Victoria leaned forward again, her eyes bright with a terrible satisfaction. How did it feel, watching David choose me? How did it feel to realize that even the man who claimed to love you could be convinced that I was the better version? The truth was devastating. It had felt like dying. Like discovering that I was fundamentally defective, that even someone who supposedly knew me better than anyone could prefer my replacement. David didn't know he was choosing between the real me and a fake, I said weakly. Didn't he? Think about it, Mia. I never pretended to be you with David. I was myself, confident, passionate, exciting. All the things you used to be before you decided being good was more important than being real. David didn't choose a fake version of you. He chose the version of you that you threw away. The words cut deeper than any physical wound. Because somewhere in their cruelty was a grain of truth. I had spent years suppressing the parts of myself that were too messy, too complicated, too much like Victoria. I'd chosen safety over authenticity, control over passion. So what now? I asked, my voice barely audible. You've won. You've destroyed my relationship, my reputation, my sense of self. Are you satisfied? Victoria was quiet for a long time, studying my face with something that might have been regret. No, she said finally. Because this was never about winning or losing. This was about understanding. Understanding what? That we're the same person, Mia. We always have been. Identical twins who were forced to become different people, but underneath all the performance and pretense, we're exactly the same. Capable of the same cruelty, the same selfishness, the same desperate need to be loved and chosen and valued. I stared at her, seeing my own face reflected back at me like a funhouse mirror, distorted but recognizable. The only difference, Victoria continued, is that I stopped pretending to be good. I embraced what we really are. What you really are. And for a moment, with David, you got to see how it felt to be authentically yourself instead of the sanitized version you've been performing. You think I enjoyed destroying you at the cathedral? I think you felt more alive in that moment than you had in years. I think you felt powerful and dangerous and completely free from the constraints of being the good twin. I think you remembered what it was like to be real. She was right. Standing at that altar, watching Victoria's carefully constructed world crumble, I had felt powerful. I had felt vindicated. I had felt like myself for the first time in decades. What you did to me was terrible, I said slowly. Yes. And what I did to you was terrible too. Yes. We sat in silence, two women who shared the same DNA and the same capacity for destruction, finally seeing each other clearly. So where do we go from here? Victoria asked. Before I could answer, Agent Chen appeared at the observation window, signaling that our time was up. Victoria would be transferred to federal prison pending trial. I would go back to my life and try to rebuild what could be salvaged, but as I watched Victoria being led away in shackles, I realized that the real question wasn't where we would go from here. The real question was who I would choose to be now that I finally understood who I really was. The good twin had been a lie, the victim had been a performance. The question was, who was Mia Reed when she stopped pretending to be anyone other than herself? I walked out of that federal building with no easy answers, but for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of the questions. 6 months after Victoria's sentencing to 15 years in federal prison, I stood in the empty house that had once been our childhood home. My parents had moved to Arizona the week after the trial ended, unable to bear the weight of what their family had become. The realtor's sign creaked in the autumn wind, and somewhere in the distance, I could hear children playing, the sound of innocence I wasn't sure I remembered. The house felt smaller than it had in my memories, stripped of furniture and the accumulated detritus of a lifetime. But the ghosts remained. In the kitchen where Victoria and I had shared countless meals while plotting against each other in ways neither of us fully understood. In the living room where we'd performed our roles as the good twin and the troubled twin for parents who chose willful blindness over difficult truths. In the bedroom we'd shared until we were 12, where we'd whispered secrets that had somehow twisted into weapons. I climbed the stairs to our old room, my footsteps echoing in the emptiness. The walls were still painted the pale yellow Mom had chosen when we were 10, neutral enough for two girls who were supposedly so different. Now I could see the lie. In that choice, the desperate attempt to make distinct what nature had created identical. On the windowsill sat a single photograph that the moving company had missed. Victoria and me at age 5, dressed in matching outfits we'd apparently insisted on wearing despite our parents' efforts to encourage individuality. We were grinning at the camera with gap-toothed smiles, our arms wrapped around each other, and I couldn't tell which child was which. That was the truth our family had spent 21 years trying to deny. My phone buzzed. A text from Dr. Sarah Kane, the therapist I'd been seeing since the trial ended. Remember, healing isn't about becoming someone new. It's about accepting who you've always been and choosing what to do with that knowledge. See you Thursday. The therapy sessions had been brutal. Week after week of excavating memories I'd buried so deep I'd convinced myself they were fiction. The pattern became clear once I stopped defending myself. Every time Victoria had threatened my position as the favored twin, I'd found a way to undermine her. Every success she'd achieved, I'd discovered reasons why it was undeserved or dangerous. I'd told myself I was protecting people from her influence, but really I'd been protecting my identity as the good one, the safe choice, the daughter who could be trusted. The doorbell rang, interrupting my reverie. Through the window, I could see David standing on the front porch, his hands shoved deep in his jacket pockets. We'd barely spoken since Victoria's sentencing, and I hadn't expected to see him here. I made my way downstairs and opened the door, studying the man I'd once planned to marry. He looked older, worn down by 6 months of media attention and public scrutiny. The story of the twin switch had become a cautionary tale about social media and modern relationships, dissected in think pieces and true crime podcasts. David had become a stock character in these retellings, the clueless man who couldn't tell his fiancé from her criminal twin sister. Mia, he said, his voice tentative. I heard about your parents moving. Thought you might be here. Saying goodbye to the scene of the crime, I replied, stepping aside to let him in. He followed me into the empty living room, his eyes taking in the bare walls and scuffed hardwood floors. I've been wanting to talk to you. To apologize, really apologize, for everything that happened. Which part? Cheating on me with my sister, or believing her lies about me being boring and controlling? David winced. All of it. But also for not seeing what was really happening. Victoria told me things about you, about your past, that made me think I didn't know who you really were. Now I realize she was telling me about herself. Was she? I moved to the window, looking out at the street where Victoria and I had learned to ride bikes, where we'd had our first fights, where we'd begun the long process of becoming enemies. Or was she telling you about both of us? What do you mean? I turned back to face him, seeing confusion in his eyes. David still wanted simple answers, clear heroes and villains. He wanted Victoria to be the monster and me to be the victim so he could feel better about his choices. I mean that Victoria wasn't lying when she told you I was controlling. I am. She wasn't lying when she said I was jealous of her relationships. I was. She wasn't even lying when she said I'd done things to hurt her in the past. I paused, letting the words settle between us. The only thing she lied about was pretending she was different. David's face went through several expressions: confusion, denial, a dawning horror as he began to understand what I was telling him. Mia, you're nothing like her. You're kind, you're honest. I'm honest now, I corrected. I'm honest because pretending to be good became too exhausting to maintain. But kind? David, I spent 6 months documenting every mistake you made in our relationship, every time you disappointed me, every reason why you might not be the perfect husband I deserved. Do you think I compiled that evidence out of kindness?" He stared at me, and I could see him remembering things, my subtle criticisms of his friends, my way of undermining his confidence when he challenged my opinions, my talent for making him feel like he was lucky I'd chosen him. "You think I didn't know you were pulling away?" I continued. "You think I couldn't see that you were looking for an escape from our relationship? I just never imagined you'd find it with Victoria." "So you did plan the whole thing? The wedding day revelation?" "I planned to expose her crimes, yes. But I also planned to humiliate her in the most devastating way possible. I wanted her to suffer the way she'd made me suffer. I wanted her to lose everything in front of everyone who mattered to her." I smiled, and it felt sharp and cold. "I wanted revenge, David. And I got it." The silence stretched between us, filled with the weight of honesty neither of us had expected. "Why are you telling me this?" he asked finally. "Because you deserve to know who you were really choosing between. Victoria and I aren't opposites, we're mirrors. She chose to embrace her worst impulses, and I chose to hide mine behind a performance of virtue. But the impulses were always the same." David moved toward the door, then stopped. "What does that mean for us? Is there any chance?" "No." The word came out with finality I felt in my bones. "We were never right for each other, David. I picked you because you were safe and successful and would make me look good. You picked me because I seemed like the kind of woman who would never cause you problems. Neither of us was actually choosing a person to love, we were choosing a lifestyle accessory." He flinched at the truth of it. "And Victoria?" "Victoria saw an opportunity to show me who I really was by becoming a more honest version of me. Someone who went after what she wanted without apology, who didn't hide her selfishness behind good intentions." I paused, thinking about our confrontation at the Federal building. In a twisted way, she did me a favor. By destroying your life. By forcing me to stop lying about who I am. After David left, I sat in the empty living room until the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the floors where Victoria and I had played as children. My phone had been buzzing all afternoon with calls from reporters wanting follow-up interviews, from distant relatives expressing delayed concern, from former friends curious about the real story. I ignored them all except one. "Mia?" Mom's voice was small and distant, filtered through the poor connection from their new home in Tucson. "How are you holding up, sweetheart?" "I'm okay, Mom. Really okay, maybe for the first time in years. The realtor said you were at the house today. I hope it wasn't too difficult." I thought about how to answer that. I found the photo of Victoria and me when we were 5. The one where we're wearing matching dresses. Silence on the other end of the line. "Mom, why did you and Dad work so hard to make us seem different when we were identical?" More silence. Then a sound that might have been crying. "We were scared," she said finally. "After the accident, after what you did to Victoria, the therapist said you were showing signs of something he called twin dominance syndrome. You couldn't tolerate having an identical sister who might compete with your identity. He said if we didn't help you develop a separate sense of self, you might hurt her again. So you let me become the good twin and Victoria become the problem. We thought we were protecting both of you. We thought if Victoria had to work harder for our approval, it would teach her to be more careful, more thoughtful. And we thought if you felt secure in your position as the responsible one, you wouldn't feel threatened by her. Instead, you taught me that I could get away with hurting her as long as I was subtle about it. And you taught Victoria that she'd never be good enough no matter what she did." "Oh, honey." Mom's voice broke completely now. "We didn't know. We were just trying to keep our family together." "I know. And I'm not calling to blame you. I'm calling to tell you that I understand now. About Victoria, about myself, about why everything happened the way it did. What are you going to do now?" I looked around the empty house, thinking about the question that had haunted me for months. Who was Mia Reed when she stopped pretending to be the good twin? "I'm going to be honest," I said. "About who I am, what I want, what I'm capable of. I'm going to stop performing virtue and start actually practicing it. And I'm going to accept that Victoria and I are the same person who made different choices about how to handle our worst impulses. Are you going to be okay? I'm going to be real. Which is scarier than being okay, but probably more important." After we hung up, I walked through the house one more time, saying goodbye to the lie our family had lived for 26 years. Tomorrow, I would drive back to Portland and figure out how to build a life based on truth instead of performance. I would probably make mistakes. I was still capable of cruelty, still prone to manipulation, still struggling with the same selfish impulses that had driven Victoria to crime, but I would make those mistakes as myself, not as some idealized version designed to win approval. As I locked the door behind me, I thought about Victoria in her federal prison cell, probably lying on a narrow bunk and plotting her next move. She'd been denied early parole after attempting to manipulate her way into a minimum security facility, proving that prison hadn't changed her fundamental nature, but maybe change wasn't the point. Maybe the point was acceptance of who we were, what we'd done, and what we chose to do next. I drove away from the house where the good twin and the bad twin had been created through years of careful fiction, leaving behind the ghosts of two little girls who'd been forced to become strangers to themselves and each other. In the rearview mirror, I caught sight of my reflection and saw something I'd never noticed before: Victoria's smile on my face, sharp and knowing and completely unashamed. For the first time in my life, I didn't try to hide it. The truth, I was learning, was far more frightening than any lie. But it was also the only foundation solid enough to build a real life upon, and despite everything, the destroyed wedding, the criminal sister, the public humiliation, the shattered family, I found myself looking forward to discovering who I might become when I finally stopped pretending to be someone else. The good twin was dead, the bad twin was in prison, but Mia Reed, whoever she really was finally free. 1 year later, I received a letter from Victoria. She'd found religion in prison, or at least claimed to, and wanted to apologize for everything she'd put me through. She asked if I'd visit her, if we could start over, if we could finally be the sisters we were meant to be. I wrote back a single sentence: we already were. I never heard from her again. Some mirrors, once cracked, can never be repaired. But sometimes the broken reflection shows you more truth than the whole one ever did, and sometimes, that's enough. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe and turn on the notification bell, so you don't miss any upload from us.